Hello, hello. Good evening, everybody. It is Cassie. I am here for part 2 of Let's Take a Journey. So, in the last stream, we covered a few things that are kind of important. We first talked about the very beginnings of all of this. What happened 7 years ago in the journey that I took that led to Equilibrium as it is today. And we are getting very, very close to a really, really big moment in this protocol's history. On the 20th, we will be launching Mainnet with 2.0. So let's do a quick recap of what happened last time. I'll set a little agenda for what we're going to do today. I'm going to try as hard as I can to keep things condensed down to 2 hours this time. Last time went way over time, and that was not what I aimed to do. So hopefully we'll keep it under 2 hours this time. I am going to try and start keeping a weekly cadence on this so that we can have more topics covered, because as we keep building things, more and more questions keep coming up, and really want to make sure I get everybody's answered more timely. So let's go ahead and get started. So, like I said, last time we started off with the original proposal for all of this, which was all the way back into the days when I ran a streaming series called Code Wolf Pack. And you'll probably find like little references to that all throughout a bunch of old repositories I have. We're going to actually be bringing up one of those today. So, starting things off, we walked through how do you design Discord from scratch, and we talked through the basic functional requirements, what the non-functional requirements are, and then how that works in the Web 2 context, and then how we translate things over into Web 3 in the sense of how do we translate things over into working on Q. And so obviously there were a lot of different components that came into play, and that had some interesting impacts downstream when we start to talk about how that structure works out in the Q context. Alongside that, we actually dove into some pieces of the network structure. As you can see, some of our Pepe Silvia style diagrams going on over here. And then how to actually run a testnet locally, walked through the process and had everybody clone the repo. And on that note, go ahead and go to your repo if you haven't done that since last Friday. Pull, there's new stuff, as you can see. And then after all that, we had a Q&A. So to dive into the topic of let's build Discord from scratch, there is one little piece that if you are familiar with system design interviews, you'll notice I really elided over. And the reason for that is because it's actually much more relevant for today. And that was everything over in this bucket over here, which was the actual services behind it. Like, what were the web services like? The reason why I elided over that is because there's some nuance to this that doesn't actually change from the Web 2 to the Web 3 context. And so we're going to walk through some of that today. So most importantly, one of the things that happens in a lot of chat-oriented apps is, as you even saw in the non-functional requirements, there's a very low latency requirement. Like, things have to move really quick for users, especially because interactive chats, as you can see even on Twitch, when you have a really, really busy stream, there's just so many people sending messages super quick, and they're responding to something that maybe is a video broadcast in the Twitch context, or on Discord sometimes in the video or audio chat context. Either way, you have these things that really prompt very, very low latency messaging. And so if we're just using pure like REST style web services, you'll end up in this scenario where the services themselves can't be, can't be fast enough if you use something like REST, because you'll end up having this pattern where the UI is just repeatedly polling over and over and over again. So you noticed that I had all of the arrows over here completely omitted. And the reason for that is because there's actually another aspect to all this that's really important to keep that latency as low as possible. And that is the use of some sort of long-running connection. In a lot of web services today, that usually is replaced with WebSockets, and that's no different than what we're going to deal with ourselves. But the idea is that you'll have, for like the initial hydration fetch, like you click on a server. Or in Discord parlance, or you click on a particular channel in Discord parlance, you will make a request against their web service. It will send you down everything that it has. There might even be an application level cache, especially if you've already done that fetch and you're just switching between various channels. But at the end of the day, you'll have some sort of actual raw REST request to get the bulk of the data. And then for the actual live chat, like that is actually flowing once you're looking at a particular channel, or you have a background subscription to another channel as you're trying to get messages and notifications and all that. All of that's being carried over with WebSockets. And so I omitted that part because we're going to start tackling that portion in today's stream. Probably won't get to all of it, probably will carry over into the next stream. But like I said, we're going to do these in a weekly cadence moving forward. So whatever we don't manage to capture today, we will capture next Sunday. And so that'll give folks some extra opportunities to think things through and ask questions after watching the recap. I did get a few comments from folks that I talk too fast, and I know that King, I don't know if King's watching tonight, but if you are watching tonight or you're watching the YouTube video that will be posted later, I'll try to remember to do an auctioneering example later. So let's go ahead and dive into things, and we're going to get started by doing a little bit of a trip down memory lane. So I've had a number of repositories, open source, closed source, that I've worked on for a long period of time. Some of that's on GitHub, some of that nobody will ever know. But at the end of the day, there's still a lot of stuff that I've worked on. But there is one, if you've been following me for a very long time. Let's see if I can find it. Really? Okay, that's lame. Let's try this. All right, so the example that started it all was Howler. Howler is the build from scratch Discord clone. And you can see that it's a very interesting repository to look at if you, have talked to me in recent history, because it uses a language that I don't really code a whole lot in anymore, which is C#. In fact, actually, a fun little note about Q's history is that I actually wrote Q originally in C#. The reason why I ended up switching to Golang originally was because I was trying to get a much faster performing runtime over WebAssembly, and Go did a much better job of that than the very, very poor native AOT integration with C#'s mono runtime. It was there's like this whole mess of open source components mixed in with Microsoft's native AOT work, and it just, I don't know what it is about it, but it's very, very slow, and so too slow to be usable. So while I was building out Q and moving very far away from Howler itself, remained in C# and is languishing in the sun, so to speak. So we're going to actually pick up on some of that today. So just to walk through the repository really quick, if anybody wants to clone this, I'm actually going to push an update after today's stream that will have basically the code base we'll be working off of, the updated Howler that's going to be merged in with Q. Not merged in the repo sense, but merged in the sense of like we're going to actually make Howler start communicating with Q. So to start things off, there is the UI facing component, which is just a relatively small ASP.NET like scaffolding over a just a standard single page application in TypeScript. So the meat of it, if you're familiar with basic TypeScript, JavaScript based single page apps, is all inside that client app folder. When this update lands for this repository, pretty much all of this is going to be yeeted into the sun, and it will just be this like core application for the SPA at the root level. And I'll walk through the reasons why along the way, but we won't need the rest of the old stuff because the old stuff was a bunch of Web 2 style services that you deploy to Amazon. But it's important to actually refer to these things so people can understand what we're moving and why we're moving it and how that all composes together. So basic structure of Howler was a CQL-based data store, not entirely unlike what I've described over here. And I say CQL compatible, but at the time it actually was Apache Cassandra instead of SiloDB. Same difference, they're API compatible, at least for the CQL. So at the database level, we had a few minor migrations, and you can see like the last time these were touched was 3 years ago. And we had like the initial key space being created and all the tables corresponding to things like spaces, which was our equivalent of servers, channels, messages, and all the basic things you need for management. Similarly, we had subsequent changes that happened along those various streams, and that's the gist of it. It's basically just a CQL bundle of tables. So then we also had this notion of an auth gateway, and this starts to get into the history of how this evolved from something that was purely Web 2, and then I started to migrate into this idea of using federation to try to solve for some of the problems of censorship resistance. And so the way that we handled this was we actually had a 2-tier authentication system. And so in that Excalidraw that I presented that last session, I was talking about using something like Auth0. We actually used AWS Cognito. Not much difference between the two in just being a basic auth server. Honestly, Auth0 is probably, if you're doing Web 2 oriented stuff, is probably a better bet these days. But anyway, so we used that for our auth service for the core. So we had like a centralized repository for authentication, so that if somebody claimed a username, then that username would apply to any of the federated servers, so you didn't run into this weird issue, because like even at that time Mastodon was a thing, and Mastodon had this really annoying behavior, and it still does, where you have like these usernames that are these long strings of like username at particular Mastodon server, and it's this kind of mess. It's not really great for user experience, and it also gets really complicated. So instead what we did with the design was that there was basically the core authentication, and that gave you an auth token, but the auth token didn't actually apply to any of the servers. This was also additionally useful in the federated context, because if you did have just a basic auth token that came from a centralized auth host, and you were just passing that along to the particular federated server, that auth token would, one, if you did it right, would only be valid for that particular server, and also two, if you did it wrong, it would be a replayable auth token that any of those federated servers, if they were malicious, could then replay against a bunch of other auth servers and then steal your identity on those servers. So in order to reduce the blast radius, I came up with this like neat concept called an auth gateway, which was basically a JWT inside of a JWT. Not really, but like the auth server was an OAuth server that would take that response that was specifically targeting the the particular server that you wanted to authenticate against, and it would do this like, instead of the typical 3-leg loop that you have with OpenID Connect style applications, it was actually a 4-leg loop where you would go from one to the next to the auth gateway, back to the UI, and then to the actual federated host server. Okay, it looks like I have a oh, hello Picroflow. Did I say that right? I hope I did. Thanks for catching that. Yeah, I'm not surprised to see those pop up. Any opportunity, people will try to get on the grind. They will do it. Thanks for that. All right. So anyway, the purpose of the auth gateway was to separate those concerns on what auth token corresponded to what server. And so we also had some basic configuration needs, like if you were deploying it in a federated context, you would have to specify certain parameters relevant to your particular hosted server. Had a bunch of stuff around the database that basically was like scaffolding to provide the repository pattern and a whole bunch of other stuff. Had an indexer The indexer was kind of funky. I don't know if it's going to be that valuable to dive into architecturally because we're going to just like completely cut it. QR shuttle was how we could provide some nice interop for mobile and desktop, because one of the things that comes into play with the multi-legged off hopping flow is that that's a lot of JWTs getting thrown around, and once you have them, then you're authenticated for as long as you are. But when you have already been logged in and you're wanting to log in on another device, you could go through that entire auth flow all over again, or you could use this like QR based flow that would basically transport the auth tokens, so that way you don't have to do, say that you're connected to 100 different servers. You don't have to do 100 auth flows waiting for all that to complete, which would be a real pain. And then we also had a React Native based Howler mobile application, which definitely did not get developed that far. So that's the basic structure of it. There was a Docker Compose file and a bunch of Docker files for all the various services. Literally was made to be as simple as possible, because this, again, was supposed to be an educational tool anyway, so that you could just run Docker Compose up. Downside is, if you did pull this right now and you tried that, you would immediately get hit with the ravages of time, because this poor client application in JavaScript succumbs to the nature of JavaScript applications. And of course, all of the package dependencies are woefully out of date, and some of them are actually now just completely missing from NPM. So it doesn't work very well if you just try to pull it and run it. But thankfully, I already took care of all of that. And so the Howler repository that we'll be working with today is just the client application, and it has been thoroughly updated and also trimmed down quite a bit. Since we didn't need half the stuff, since we're not doing any like .NET scaffolding or anything like that. So definitely makes life a lot easier, should be much easier to follow. So let's walk through the application structure, because understanding like how this is actually all structured out is going to be valuable. And I'm going to make a few observations about this, like things that I wouldn't do these days in case somebody wants to use this as a template for building an application on Q. Oh, awesome, cool. I want to walk through those things because I did things back in a day where it was actually the norm to build applications like this for JavaScript and TypeScript, and now like people dunk on each other on Twitter for some reason for using some of these libraries, and I think that's kind of dumb because they still have value, and there's like a good 30 to 40% of React applications still using these dependencies, so that kind of dunk is unnecessary. But just putting it on the table, we do use React Redux, and specifically I use Redux Saga as well to make it much more easy to compose series of interactions that can happen. Part of the like core functional requirements and non-functional requirements, especially non-functional, with the latency aspect, is that users, when they use an application, can sometimes have behaviors that are less ideal for interacting with an API. So if you think about things in the context of how you structure an application to interact with a just a simple backend server, instead of thinking of things in terms of WebSockets, you have your chat box, you type your message, you hit enter or submit or whatever you're doing, and by consequence you end up with this call. Like there's either a WebSocket post that like the actual message gets sent over the WebSocket to the recipient server, or you end up with this REST style post or put or whatever. And if you have a user that is like me on Discord, then you would run into the condition where a user can potentially just be like typing just 2 or 3 words enter, 2 or 3 words enter, and like more or less stream of consciousness posting. And if you were to try to like use that as per like request per interaction, you would end up with this really painful user experience, because now you have to go through all of those loops. So the reason why I used Redux Sagas back in the day was that it was one of the few methods that was like really well put together, where you could compose interactions such that you don't necessarily end up with like a queue of requests that creates like really jagged user experience behaviors. And so the way that that works is you have a series of generators instead of having basic actions for your reducers and like your in the Redux context, you have like reducers and actions, and the actions will dispatch state changes, and then those state changes get reduced into the actual state that Redux exposes. Sagas decouples those actions from the traditional Redux model such that it actually will have certain types of verbs that say more specifically what you intend to do with them. And so one of the things that I can demonstrate from that is that, let me see if I can find a better one. Yeah, okay, there we go. So say, for example, a user is using the UI and they're hitting a bunch of different space icons, or server in Discord parlance. They're hitting a bunch of space icons, and you were to potentially like load each one in sequence in which they were clicked. That would suck. So instead, the way that sagas work is that they let you actually use a generator function that says how you actually want to handle that. So anytime the request space action is being invoked, instead of actually, inducing that action every single time, instead what you do is you have this yield take leading, and this take leading function will instead say, like, we will take like basically as we're getting all these actions, if somebody's just clicking really fast, it will wait until the very final one, it'll take the very first one. And so it's basically a way of queue management for user behaviors. I hope that clarifies a little bit, because I know a lot of people nowadays would not be using Redux or Redux sagas or anything like that. Like these are commonly, as I said, dunked on Twitter for being archaic. Like, how dare somebody build an application with these anymore? The thing most people use nowadays is like React Query, and the irony is that React Query does have some of these same behavioral components put in them. You have the ability to actually dictate what your particular hooks are going to do in terms of how it's actually producing interactions. And so it's the same thing, just a different structural model for how to reason about it. There's trade-offs. I'm not going to dive that much deeper into it, but anyway, the thing that's important here is that we have basically the structures of all the various interactions that we're going to be working with as we're building out this basically taking the existing API and rewrapping it to work on Q. And so it structures down into some really basic concepts. We do have this notion of servers. I'm keeping it here so that people can see where it came from and work through and reason about. Like, we have this notion of auth tokens, server tokens, and like I said, these are things that just don't even apply in the purely decentralized context, but there are some things that will apply. And one of those things is that in order to make all this work really well, we can't just have the SPA directly interact with like an RPC over REST. That would suck. And so in order to make this a reasonable user experience, we actually do have to create our own local WebSocket handler and our own local API handler that will do the actual interaction and dispatching with the Q network as a whole. So structurally, it isn't too far off from how it's already designed. It's just that the purpose-built pieces of this changes a bit. It's no longer federated. And so let me dive into the actual app structure. You can see some of the old components I've just commented out. We have things like the old AWS Amplify framework for supporting Cognito. That's just commented out. We're going to replace this with an actual passkeys based experience, because in Q everything works off of passkeys for authentication purposes. And then we have some basic routes, and I've put in some very hard-coded values so that we can vet out the UI while we're building certain pieces out, so we don't have to deal with like some requests being available, some not. Let me grab something real quick. Okay, cool. So let's I'm trying to think of what the next best thing to dive in. Oh yeah, there we go. Okay. So we already had an API, as I said. Like this was a functioning Discord clone, and so we did have a bunch of features. There are some that never got put in the public repository. For those who watched these a long time ago, you might even remember somebody in the chat that was actually talking about being interested about investing in Howler and the ideas that were being developed. And I later found them going through all of my source materials, the Figma diagrams, everything, because it was all public. And they were just like ruthlessly copying everything over. And then I saw they invested in some small startup that was basically building a Discord clone. And so I one got a very strong distaste for VCs from that, and two also had to basically close everything down minus what was already published. And so anyway, structurally we do have at least the notion of spaces. We have groups of channels that are under a space. We have channels, the messages in the channels, types of messages, so that you can have things like regular messages themselves, like text-based messages, events like a user has joined, a user has left, if there is any sort of reply basis to any of those things, like a bot interaction, embeds, so things like videos or audio or whatever. And then we also had reactions and mentions, and then there was the basic like role management stuff too. And so we have a lot of API surface area to cover, and we're not going to get into all of that today or even in the next session. So what I want to focus in on is getting some core basic functionalities in place. So we're going to start things off with the very first thing that a user has to do for interacting with anything on Q, which is we have to actually get the user to produce a passkey. And so one of the things that's coming with 2.0 is our JavaScript-based SDK. That JavaScript SDK, you've already actually seen some instances of it in the Equilibrium website. We have things like the token application example, and in doing so, there's these sample interactions. If you have Safari, you can use the Touch ID integration. If you have Chrome, we don't have PRF support on this. I have to be a little bit cautious about how PRF integration works right now. For those who have followed along for a while, you've already heard my rant, but basically Chrome has done this really stupid thing where they originally had large blob support and then they completely shelved it. And reading between the lines, it seems to be something about not wanting to support a standard that Apple is pushing and wanting to break things that Apple is pushing, so that way they retain their browser market dominance. Whatever the case, they've been pushing using pseudorandom functions instead of large blob storage, which is what we use. And PRF's fine. Problem is that PRF's not supported in the current version of Safari. So now we have to have like a dedicated passkey handler for all the different browsers. It's like 1990s all over again with supporting Internet Explorer versus Netscape, and it's really frustrating. But that being said, the nice thing is that Safari 18, I think is the next version, they actually are going to support PRF. And the only problem is, so far, I've been using their technology preview beta. So far, every time I try to create a passkey that is using PRF, it immediately crashes the browser. And if you want to test this yourself, you can download the Safari Tech Preview. You have to like agree to some developer thing on Apple to get it, but you can go to like I think it's Levi Shuck is the guy that created like a simple PRF demo app, and immediately every single time you can try to authenticate with it, crashes your browser, and that's really frustrating. So we're not there yet. But anyway, that type of passkey interaction model is something that we're going to use regardless. Like, we don't need the large blob integration for this particular application for Howler. We can actually just use passkeys directly without having to deal with large blob or PRF, so it'll work in either browser. The rest of this is actually going to happen on the server side. So if you've never built a like, for example, if you've never built like a Electron-based application, Slack, I think VS Code even, but Slack and Discord are both Electron based. And there's basically this kind of like UI thread component and then the actual background worker thread. That worker thread's able to do a lot more things regarding like file related APIs and stuff. And what we're basically doing is copying that same kind of architectural model. We'll have the SPA based front end, and then we'll have the actual service layer backend that's able to interact with Q, the protocol. There will be a lot of applications in the first generation of Q applications that develop that will probably be adopting this. And the reason I expect that to be the case is because Q was built for people who built things in the Web 2 context, and so there's going to be like this level of hybridization that happens until we finally get to the Equinox and Event Horizon releases that allows more of those things to merge completely onto the network itself. Because inevitably, the end state is to be essentially, AWS majority APIs compatible. And so by that point, you would have, running virtual machines inside of Q that can run all the basic web server stuff that you need, and then it's just exposed through MPC TLS. And that was probably a shotgun of statements, so I'll break that down. Basically, the idea is that you would have a secure virtual machine that runs in a distributed environment on Q, and then virtual machines, whether it's in this context or even in the classic cloud context, they have this notion of simulated hardware adapters for things like Ethernet. And the way that they will do things is some form of trunking that takes the virtualized Ethernet adapter and actually connects it to the physical hardware where the actual packets are being sent along. In a distributed context, there's no specific Ethernet adapter to emit out of, and so you have to have a different model for that. And so because Equilibrium's entire context is multi-party computation, we would take packets that are specifically like TLS packets and use an MPC-based process to perform the actual TLS packet formation and sending, receiving over the MPC-based network instead of just being like a raw Ethernet adapter that we've exposed on the network itself. Because if we did that approach, it would turn into a real disaster, because then you'd end up with a lot of people exploiting it. So we do have to be very thoughtful about how this network interacts with the rest of the world. And one of those things has actually come to play recently as I started going over the numbers. So on the dashboard, we have a count that is likely wrong because one of my frickin' nodes is probably borking again. But this number's been floating around between 27 to 37,000, which is why I know that it's borked, because that number was not 27,000 earlier. But even at 27,000, there's this question of size. Like, if the network's that big, how do we compare to other networks that are also doing things like onion-based routing, like Tor, for example? And I actually looked at the statistics about Tor, and Tor is like roughly 8,000 regular nodes and like 2,000 exit nodes or something like that. So we're roughly triple the size of Tor. So thinking things through in terms of that, like if we were to try to do something like cooperatively envelop Tor to basically merge their onion routing with our onion routing, it would immediately be seen, like I'm sure it would make news, because the network would essentially look like we are attacking Tor by eclipsing their network, and that's not the case. So like I said, everything that we do with our releases has to be incredibly thoughtful about how we actually launch those and how those features interact with the rest of the world. So that's why that's not a 2.0 feature, and something that has to be worked on further, is to make sure that it doesn't become a point of abuse. Because again, like with all of these things, a network that is anonymous and decentralized and uncensorable, you do have to be very thoughtful about how you handle the abuse case, or that will be the primary use case of your network. So things like that. So diving back into the code side of things, let me grab the next. Yeah, okay. So let's start. Let's start Howler. So like I said, I'm going to be posting this repository, like updating the Howler repository so that people can follow along from the streams instead of looking at the old code base and wondering how to make it work. But let me go ahead and run yarn install. It should be pretty quick. Oh, right, node env, nice. Okay, yarn install. Oh, shoot. Node env init. I always get that screwed up. Yarn install. There we go. Please don't clip that and say Cass is bad at npm in yarn. Okay, so now we have everything installed, so let's go ahead and yarn start. Oh, nice. Okay, shoot. I'm actually already running it. Let me kill it. Let's try that again. Okay, cool. So there we go, beautiful app that is just completely blue. So like I said, we have a very boring empty interface right now. If I were to take some of it and uncomment, actually I couldn't even do that because I've completely bastardized what it was before. So let me go ahead and toss in a route for exactly the path. We're just going to call it login. One other thing you'll also find with the way that I've structured some of these things is that it uses some old names and behaviors, because again, this was previously an older version of React that I was working in. Things were very different then. I feel like I'm using the same kind of excuse that people have to say about their grandmother, like, things were very different then, just ignore her. But no, like, seriously, things were different in the way that, oh yeah, blue screen is native. Yeah, that's true, that's true. Blue screen is native on Windows, but yeah, things were very different in that style of React back then. Technically, this is a Bootstrap based, like with React Strap, to do all the stylized components. And these days, I'd be using Tailwind. There's a lot of class components in here. These days, I'd be using functional components and hooks. Lots of things have changed, and so you're just gonna have to bear with the repo. But realistically, I think this actually ends up being a really great example because people have a lot of applications today that do have that lineage of being around for a while. How do I move those things over into Q? Those will be the things that people will probably want to move over into Q, because building something just purely native for Q is going to be a bit simpler of an experience. So uplifting something that wasn't purpose-built for this is kind of a useful thing to walk through. Okay, so now I'm going to drop that in there, and then on the app side of things, I'm going to drop in an import and then pull that through. Okay, and then I think something just did something weird. I don't know what that was. Okay, let me see if I can drop in the... This is going to be a real shot in the dark. It's probably not it. Yeah, it's not it. And one thing that you'll notice, this isn't something that you'll get out of the box from a regular like node-based application or React, like create React app application. I had to type in the alt there. I have alt text and other accessibility hints that are required. It's just something that's pretty important that people tend to overlook. Okay, cool. So we have a logo. So we are routing to the right thing. Cool. I'm going to skip that part for right this second and show the next part and show what the actual structure of the app looks like as if you were logged in. And so you can see very similar interface to Slack, or sorry, not Slack, to Discord. You have your channel groups, you have channels, you have an input box, and now I just have it looping things through in memory. You have your basic status editor, like profile information. Like I said, this was like very fully featured, and so I've kind of like ripped it inside out, and so it's got like a still like the heart still beating while the rest of the corpse is just like completely flayed open. But you have things like being able to do image uploads and create spaces and join existing ones, community guidelines. That's a fun story in of itself. That was in the days of trying to get onboarded to various like platforms like the iOS App Store and stuff. They were really pedantic about like having, you know, fulfilling community guidelines and all sorts of stupid shit like that. So you'll find a few things in there that I haven't completely ripped out yet. But yeah, that's the basic structure. So we're gonna go ahead and set up the login process. So without further ado, let's go ahead and go back to the login here. This is structurally garbage. Let's try and fix that. And so we'll need to have a CSS file. I think I had, let me see what it's pulling in. Oh, it's pulling in from custom. That's annoying. Let me see if I have, nope, I just did a bunch of stuff for Amplify because that's what I was using back then. Some of this is a reminder to myself. Fun. Okay, so let's do login SCSS, and then we will have, oops, we'll have login pane, sign in. Login pane, I think, is already in the app or the custom.scss. So let's set up the sign in. I am lazy as hell, so I'm just going to actually, and this is the stuff that makes me wish I had actually taken the effort to upgrade this to Tailwind, because this is like going to be chewing glass. So we'll go ahead and just scope the image, set the width to something relatively reasonable like 200px, and should auto. Oh, you're going to do this to me. This is sad. Okay. Class sign in. Oh, did I not import it? I didn't import it. I didn't save the import, of course. Okay, well there you go. Go ahead and just tack on some nice text alongside it. Let's actually make it smaller. Let's set the text to 18 point. Like I said, a lot of this would be done with Tailwind these days because this is horrendous. But we are trying to make this work inside the scope of this already existing application. But this is going to lead to a funny moment, which is how do you center a div, right? We do already have some of it centered. Let me see. I had in the app. Yeah, that's what I thought. So the login pane, like I said previously, was defined in here. We have like the flexbox, even spacing, line item center. I'm gonna be super lazy here, so do not judge me for the horrendous shit that I'm about to do. Let me call this title. I think that was the old convention I used to have, was that like I scoped names. Like I said, a lot of this is going to be working off of a little bit of memory from 3 years ago. So if I actually do manage to have decent memory here, this is going to be surprising. But let's go ahead and do flex. Oh no, display flex direction column. Okay, cool. And so then we should have. I'm trying to remember if it's justify content center. That'll do it. No. Like I said, we're going to be playing the game of how do you center a frickin' div. Oh, right, I bet it's going to have something stupid, like I need to have... Whoop. Yeah, let's build Howler from scratch. Pretty sure what I did last time was just a bunch of stupid fucking divs in the middle. You can tell I'm not a UI person. I know, right? Like, it's just so much easier when you use Tailwind. I'm trying to remember. Oh, right. There's an aspect around the height. I don't think that's actually going to succeed. Let me try VH. Yeah, okay, I did have it centered. Great. Okay, so now the next part is going to be actually putting in the box to do the authentication loop. Now, one of the things that the current implementation of the JS SDK for Quill integrations does have as kind of like a kludge is that there's an example on how to actually perform the, like how to display the passkeys component and how to basically like create the UI for it. You are free to completely ignore all of that and just invoke the raw API calls of the SDK itself. Like, it's just guidance that is meant to be helpful for applications that are built these days instead of in the olden days. So it does have things like Tailwind already assumed and baked into the design of it and stuff. So I'm going to actually have to style that on the fly too, which is going to be massively disappointing. So let's go ahead and add our button. And so one of the things that we will need to do this is we are going to need a, let me see, I'm trying to remember how I actually structured this because again, old stuff. Type primary, great. No icon. Oh, okay, yeah. See, like I said, there's lots of old things and old behaviors that may not necessarily be in vogue anymore. So we'll just have sign in with passkey. One of the things that we'll also need to check is we'll need to check whether or not what is it missing? Oh, sweet Jesus. Okay. It does not need that. Why would it even do that? Visual Studio Code, come on, that was terrible. Great. Okay, cool. This is very poorly formatted garbage, but it'll at least work. So now we have a button in place. We should, wow, that is Xbox huge. Let me see. Oh, do I have, nope, I don't have it zoomed in. Why is it so freaking huge? Did I create a size for it? I did not. What in the world? Okay. You get to also see me arguing with me from 3 years ago on the fly. Cool. Let's see what the font size was. Oh, I don't have one specified. Great. Why not? Cool. Cool. Oh, wait, is it because it's inheriting literally the default size of the parent component? Because that's going to be really disappointing. I bet it is. I bet it is. I bet it is. And this is going to be so frustrating. Okay, cool. Yep, that was exactly it. Son of a gun. Okay. There we go. All right, so now we have our sign in with passkey button. Obviously, we're going to want to gate it based, we're going to want to gate it based on the presence of a passkey that's already been saved. And so we're going to need an actual component here to give us that context. And so, like I said, there's going to be some of this that is in an unpublished SDK. That's because we still have some quirks to work out before 2.0. But the basic premise is that it has all of the necessary components you need in order to integrate with Q either directly or indirectly through a tertiary service that you'll run for your application. So let's go ahead and grab that. I'm gonna do some off-screen magic. Great. So we'll go ahead and add in a modal, call it passkey modal. You're going to see a bunch of different things pop up on the fly. We're going to have passkeys. We have types for the passkeys. It's going to have a bunch of directives that don't make sense for this path. So let's get it moved down to passkeys. Great. And then we need a context for it. Let me grab the context for it. More off-screen magic. Great. Cool. Okay, and then we will also, oh right, I need to redirect that. We do not need the API client as a different thing. Context, passkey context. What do you mean there's no module named that? It's literally right there. Oh, that's super annoying. Oh, I have it backwards. Cool. Okay. Oh, it helps if I actually say context instead of contexts. Great. Okay. From there, we should have... It's super annoying. Alright, and then there's a bunch of stuff that we won't have here. Like I said, there's going to be some stuff that's relative to an example, like our recommended best practice, basically. So some of this is a little bit overbearing in terms of how it's describing how to use things. We'll make it fit this particular use case. But we have our passkeys context, passkey modal. The next thing we need is the actual SDK integration itself. So there's a few pieces that needs to exist. We need the WASM exec implementation, and then we need the actual WASM bundle. And I do believe that that covers the most of it. Let me double check. All right, yeah. I knew I was going to forget something if I didn't check. So the other thing that we need is we actually need to thread in that WASM exec file. And the passkeys context itself will actually load the WASM runtime. Cool, now we have everything we need. All right. Let me see if there's anything going on in the console that's funky. No, everything looks good. Great. Okay. So now the next thing we need to do is actually thread through this context. So if you're not familiar with React, I'm sorry that the first example of this is going to be React, because there's definitely some pain points that you might not see otherwise, or may not have to deal with otherwise. But we'll have to do what we can. Passkeys context or passkeys provider. Cool. And then from there, if I recall correctly, the way I had this set up was to immediately, yep, use effect to start the runtime. Great, cool. So assuming everything works, yep, we had the brief flash, it loaded the WASM, we are good to go. Cool. All right, so now the next thing that we need to do is to wire through the provider call. So this is going to be a little bit of modern React that we're going to be feeding in here. But under the login, there should be a hook that we use to get the, if I can spell, hook that we use to actually do the authentication. And I'm going to forget it off the top of my head because I'm live streaming. So let me go ahead and pull it. Show passkey prompt. Oh, right. Use passkeys context though. Show passkey prompt. Great. Cool. And then from there, we should be able to actually show the passkey prompt. The expression is not callable. Oh, right. Not the function. Set show passkey prompt. My bad. There's a few other details that I have in here that I will actually remove. One thing that you'll notice is that I have a bunch of stuff that if you have a keen eye, you'll know what that's related to. If you don't know what that's related to, then, well, you'll find out. All right, cool. And then I should have a few other bits. Let's see. Great. Okay. And then there's going to be some stuff that is thoroughly wrecked because of this. Make sure that I have the right, yep, okay, cool. This is the fun part of coding streams where somebody is just like blankly looking into a stream or looking into a screen and typing and not talking. But it is a necessary component. Cool. Okay, we have what we need. Great. Okay. So set show passkey prompt. Great. Okay. Now I have a bunch of assumptions that I need to unwind from the passkey modal. This is what I get for doing things on the fly and not actually setting things up cooking show style. You get a bit more raw of an experience, but at the same time, I also realized that there are certain things that I wasn't ready to talk about yet that blindly passed by on the screen, so that's frustrating. Okay, so let me check the show passkey prompt part. Great. Okay, set show passkey prompt, blah, 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 blah. I actually should just set that to false because it's done. Great, cool. And then... Yep. Okay, so that is one other thing that I will have to thread through. We'll get to that in a second. Let me just set that as a blank string for now. So that way we can at least get to the passkey prompt part. What am I still erroring on? Some really bad JavaScript. Got it. Okay. Yep, that's what I get for cool. Okay. One more thing. Do I just need to refresh? What's going on? Oh, types. Other types. Okay. And that should be good. Great. Okay. Sign in with passkey. We hit the button. It is now doing the next thing, which is probably... Yeah, okay. Cool. So now we've done that. Now we got to wire in the actual modal. I probably should have started with something else instead of the passkeys. I had forgotten that I had something in there that wasn't supposed to be shown yet. Okay. So let's add... Where are you? Oh, it's just going to be under login. Okay, fine, whatever. I believe, if I recall correctly, yep, okay, cool. I was going to say, I believe that the passkey actually has state that is set based on the presence of certain context variables. Yeah, I know, right? Like, shit. There's some things I need to nail down first before I start showing some of the things I've built. Okay, so this is in Tailwind. So I'm going to have to like do as little mangling as I have to in order to make this work. So I'm going to try to just hack in some Tailwind for the sake of getting this into a workable state. I'm not happy about having to do that, but the alternative is like trying to actually shoehorn Tailwind into a Bootstrap-based project and hope that it doesn't royally destroy everything. I mean, I could try that, but I don't think that that would make the content, it wouldn't make a great use of the time. So let's just shoehorn that in. Okay, cool. So sign in with passkey, removes the hidden class, now it's unhidden. One thing you'll notice is that this UI is garbage right now because of the fact that we're using basically none of the actual styling that it's supposed to have. But you'll notice that the text is going to feel very familiar, and it's because, as you can see, the passkey SDK integration has been on the Quilibrium website for a while. Like, people who have been, toying around with the labs that we've been running have actually been toying around with a really early version of our SDK. So you can see the same workflow happens here. Oh, great, cool. That is one other thing. Okay, so I will mention this real quick. If you are wanting to use the SDK, you will need to add buffer. Cool. I think there is also a certain trick I have to do here to make that actually exposed. We'll find out real quick. Yep, okay, still didn't. Great. Using the buffer polyfill, I think it's... I'm trying to remember exactly. I hate doing things on the fly like this. This is why I used to do the cooking show route, where I had things prepped ahead of time so that I didn't have to waste too much time trying to find stuff. Let me see if I can find it though. Yep, there it is. Cool. It's one of the lamest things that you have to do to actually make this function. Oh, and then I actually have to import the buffer. Ugh. Cool. And now it can't find that, which means that this script didn't actually run. That's interesting. Okay. Let's see. Let's make sure that the actual UI component, or not UI component, that the index file is actually holding what we're expecting. Okay, cool. Wasm exec. It is indeed the right file. Did the passkeys provider actually run? It should have. I'm gonna do the lamest thing ever and just add a simple console log so we can make sure that it did not. Oh, there it did. Okay, great. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I just didn't save the file like I usually do. Hey, that's why. Okay, cool. Okay, cool. Got this error on Safari in the QLab when trying to create an account. Undefined is not an object. JP, what version of Safari are you using? Are you doing this on OS 10, or are you doing this like on, I don't even know if the Windows Safari is still even around, but I assume this is on a Mac, right? I will wait for your reply. All right. In the meantime, let's see. Link option user ID. Okay, it's Mac M3. Cool. That's pretty weird. I assume you were doing the token application, or were you talking about Hexmas? Because there's two different places that we actually dog fooded this, and you can't navigate to it anymore because it's like the link's gone, but you can still actually get to it, which is our Hexmas puzzle challenges, and that actually did have a customized passkey loop. Okay, token application, and it said undefined is not an object. Do you have like any sort of script blockers? Because one thing that might happen, for example, one of the things that I have normally like enabled, set up, going on like mobile phones and everything is I have lockdown mode set up, and lockdown mode will absolutely stop a browser from running WebAssembly. Like it considers that a potential attack vector, and so you have to like manually permit that particular web page to run. Okay. Oh, right. I think I actually had, oh shoot, okay. Well, that's on me. Let me go ahead and go back and change some of this back to what it was. Unfortunately, thought I was gonna be able to get away with like not diving into that, but okay. Okay, that part I don't need. Cool. And then this is complaining about, oh right, because I gotta save the types too. No. Okay, cool. So then it's no longer set passkeys. True. Now it's this whole mess. Love that. What did I have it set to? Value. Value true. It needs to have all the other stuff. Fantastic. Well, it won't need the address yet. Oh, yeah. Well, okay. So one of the things that I was going to add here. You know what? Screw it. No, if you know what it is, you know what it is. If you don't know what it is, then you will find out. I already put address. What am I missing? Cool. Okay, that's the time saver. All right, great. And I'm still heading the options user ID must be between. What am I missing? Okay. Yeah, on the browser bar, if it says not secure, it means that you're actually running it in HTTPS. Oh, hey, Demi Poet, thanks. But yeah, so if you have it as HTTP instead of HTTPS, when you try to do WebAuthn based interactions, it will just fail. But if you use HTTPS, then you'll actually get the proper WebAuthn interaction. Okay. All right, back to this. Like the options. I'm feeling kind of dumb here because I am honestly kind of confused where this is coming from. Let me see if error. This feels. Feels like something's missing. It might just be that the user name. Maybe that's the problem. Yep, that's the problem. Okay, that's on me. Cool. Okay, I'm just dumb. That's the crux of the problem. So anyway, you do need to have a username, and the reason, and this was part of the best practices stuff that I had in place here. There's some things that I prefer not be present. The username does need to be specified because otherwise you ended up this. You can see like the evolution of the way that this SDK worked is that originally it just yeeted at you the raw queue address, which if somebody saw use Touch ID to sign in for blah, 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 they're going to be like, I don't know what the hell this is, and they are never going to remember the address. And so instead, if you have a simple like, here is my username that I wish to create, you actually have a easier way to relate to users whatever their content is supposed to be. So we do need to set a username, and let's go ahead and what are the other context components? I can never remember. Current passkey info. Great. Okay, cool. Now we're back on track. So current passkey info is going to have some information. If the user has already created a passkey, the SDK will basically figure that out for you. And if it isn't present, then we actually want to display this. Okay, so we will do that, and for the sake of at least verifying what state we're in, technically this should be sign in with passkey, the other one should be create an account. You know what, screw it, I'm just gonna copy. Okay, and then oh, not sign with passkey. We need to. Oh yeah, actually we do need to sign with passkey, right? Okay. Cool. Oh, I had that backwards. Duh. And we'll get to the payload in just a sec. Okay, cool. Sweet, okay, glad that that worked. Alright, cool. So now we have, instead of sign in with passkey, we have create account. So if it detects that there is already a passkey present, then it will say sign in with passkey, but otherwise it will pass us into this create account. I'm not going to dive into creating a full-blown UI right now, so instead I'm going to just do a simple input, and we'll have an on change. And then we'll define our username, set username, use state. One of the things that people will find out very quick about me if you have not seen other streams before is that I cannot talk and type to save my life, and I will mention it every time. Okay, so now we have that in place, and as long as, yeah, okay, as long as username is set, then we will be able to create an account. So we'll go ahead and call this user test user because I'm really creative. And then it will pass through to the passkeys provider, and I forgot to actually wire that up. And of course that won't work unless username is actually set. Technically, I could just like do username bang instead of this if, but I like to make TypeScript happy and like to make the linter not unhappy. So test user, and then hit create account. It'll do the same loop. And this time we will get a passkey for test user will be saved in iCloud keychain and available on all your devices. So now we have a basic key system for authenticating users. So this skips over all of the like OpenID Connect nonsense and having to have centralized authorities. When you build an application on Q, you're not thinking things through in the same context of other Web3 environments where you're like, okay, now I need to integrate the wallet API. Now I need to like, set up Wallet Connect and wait for that WebSocket to actually hit that particular wallet that the user's using. They have to scan a QR code. Sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you have to make them refresh the app like 50 times because Wallet Connect doesn't always work for whatever unknown reason. No, you use the browser's passkey and you're done. And that actually gets into something that I forgot to put on the agenda for tonight, but something that I want to mention real quick because I know that a few people got hit by this, and I'm very upset that that happened to them, and I really wish that that hadn't happened to them. But there are some people who had their wallets compromised in some way recently and had lost some of their wrapped quell because of it. This happens because Ethereum's security model is dog shit. Just put it plainly. The way that people use wallets is something that is information dense, and not only is it information dense, it's also actionability low. In other words, like the users aren't being provided with enough information for them to actually take adequate action, and it's one of the most critical like failings of the entire. I mean, it's not just Ethereum, to be clear. I will dog on all the chains for this because all of them have this wallet-based model and all of them have this really vague presentation of interaction data when you're creating a transaction on the network. So there's just this nonsense where a user they can go to a website, like, for example, this happens to Equilibrium. We have impersonators that have made typo like they're doing typo squatting of our domains. They have like Equilibrium with like 3 L's or some crap like that. And that site looks like our site but has a wallet drainer. And one of the things that wallet drainers will sometimes do is they will sometimes put a approve message. And the reason they'll do approved messages is that users' wallets are frequently less sophisticated at handling message signing versus actual transaction signing. And even then, when it gets to transaction signing, sometimes those transactions they will display like the consequences. Like if it's just a standard ERC20 approve, a lot of them will now say, hey, this allows this address to transfer X number of whatever token this corresponds to. However, there are other account interactions, and they can sometimes give you that same kind of same change to your limits for approvals and so on. And so the really frustrating thing about all this is, you know, the easiest way to solve this is passkeys. Why? Because every interaction with a passkey is done locked to a domain. So in other words, when I do this, I have this, you'll be signed into localhost with your passkey for test user. Great. And I would open up my passwords to show you that that is locked into this domain at localhost port 3000, but I definitely wouldn't do that. So basically, the domain locking functionality of passkeys is sophisticated enough that, in general, your passkey will not work on other domains. And in order for it to work on another domain, you have to perform some sort of delegated action. On Q itself, we build applications with this notion of being able to have delegated consent. In other words, like if you used OpenID Connect before, you'll be very familiar. And even if you didn't know you were using OpenID Connect, you'll definitely be familiar with this flow if you ever used like sign in with Google, where you go to a website and you want to sign in, and it says like sign in with Google, and you click yes. It takes you to a Google page, and then your Google page will have you actually sign in if you're not already signed in. And if you are signed in or you just signed in, it will give you a prompt saying this site is requesting this info from your Google account. Do you want to proceed? And why is it that we've had so much of this already present baked into web standards, yet our wallet infrastructure has been like this wild west of people eating fucking hex codes that like I don't know if I don't know if everybody watching this has been like, you know, using Ethereum since its early days, but like some of the oldest wallets, if you were around for that, would actually just give you the raw like transaction hex. It wouldn't tell you anything about it. And people were literally just blindly signing random hex strings, not knowing jack shit about what it was actually doing. And so like when we already had OpenID Connect at that time, when we already had this delegated auth flow, why in the world did wallets pick up this nonsense of just like signing raw hex? It's insane to me. Anyway, so the way that Q works is that we do support delegated auth flows, very similar to delegated consent flows, similar to how OpenID Connect works today. How that relates to your wallet in like the wallet context of like when you have an Ethereum wallet, for example, you have all of your assets, your ERC20s, your ETH itself, all of that is under your given address. When you manage that, you are managing one singular key, or maybe a collection of keys, but uses the HD like derivation path for the given, particular wallet. But either way, all of that is managed by one key. And so if you need to do a signature, you are doing that on behalf of that key. The Q model is different. The Q model is completely separated, walled garden. So in other words, for every domain you have a different key. So you don't actually work in that same context. So if you wanted to, for example, you wanted to send money to somebody, and that's actually going to be an example that we're going to dive into in the next session for Howler. Like if you have somebody sends you a message and you want to send them, like they're like, hey, send me $20, and you want to send them 20 of whatever the stable coin on Q is, you would have to actually follow a delegated flow that interacts with the browser to redirect you to your literal wallet address, because the way that actual interactions with the Q network works is through actual addresses, domain addresses. And when you have that address resolved, it will prompt you like, hey, do you want to consent to this flow to, send $20 or authorize $20 to be sent? And so every single application would have to therefore have a presentment layer that says, here are the consent options that you have for this particular application. It shifts the burden from wallet makers who have to suddenly somehow become an expert in every single application that could ever exist, which that is impossible. That's called the halting problem. You can't do that. You cannot adequately predict any given application, and all these exploits take advantage of that, versus a contract or application in Q parlance being responsible for telling you, here are the interactions that you can expose, here are the interactions that you can create consent flows for, and here's what that actually means. And the onus is on the application builder. And we'll dive into that in another session, but I just wanted to clarify that because all of this converges around this simple thing right here of creating a passkey. It's a very long rant, and I'm only partially motivated by this rant, or motivated to give this rant because of what happened to some people recently losing their wrapped quill. That pisses me off, and it happens exactly because Ethereum is fucking broken. So anyway, you instead work with passkeys. There is no wallet. And so now we have our test user. So now that that's done, oh shoot. Yeah, okay. Now we have the second flow. Passkey's been successfully created. Oh, shoot. Did I do something? Oh, there it is. There it is. Okay. So I need to get the refresh dynamics working here well, but now you can see that the user already exists. It picks up on that user because it's stored in a way that can inform the application, hey, I have a passkey available. Now you can hit sign in with passkey. Undefined is not an object because I have something borked here, but give me a sec. Maybe I had it under username? No? Okay. Let me dive back into that. Let me check the current passkey info because I am very forgetful. Okay, so we have our address, vid, username. No, it should be the address. Undefined is not an object. Okay, this might actually be a bug from the current iteration of this. Let me check. Get our passkey. Great. Oh, it's because I don't have simulated passkey. Duh, that's on me. And there we go. What it is missing is the correct ID, I guess. Let me make sure. Oh, yeah, okay, that's why. That's what I get. Credential ID. Yep, like I said, we had some... I've been moving some things around on that. Okay, let's try that again. No? Okay. Why is it complaining? Passkey filter, get the passkey, great. trying to remember. There it is. Okay. Yep. This is what happens when I have to debug on the fly. Hey, Demi Poet. Yeah, Twitch verification is kind of a pain. No idea what that's all about, the other commenter. How do I view that? I have no idea how to actually do this. This goes to show how little I know about actually using Twitch. Okay, let's go ahead and log in. Great, it's going to fail. I know it's going to fail. Yeah, I knew it was going to fail because I didn't pass in anything useful for it to sign. Okay, cool. So that brings us back around here. Like I said, few rough edges. There's a reason why I didn't have this published yet. But let's go ahead and just make it sign a bunch of garbage. Cool. All right. So now we will do that. It will sign. And, oh, right. Hex formatting. That's what I get for operating in too many domains at once. Okay, cool. So now we have our signed message. So we'll go ahead and make sure. Is that a... No. Is that a... Yeah, it is promise. Okay. Let's go ahead and take a look at the result so that you can see what the actual output payload of signing with the passkey results in. And we have... Oh. I should actually await that promise. That's on me. Okay. Cool. Now we have our signature. Okay. So now you have like the complete end-to-end flow of integrating with the passkeys, supporting the ED448 curve that's needed to actually interact on the queue level. And so that's the first stage of actually performing that integration. And so from there, then the next flow would actually pass along to the backing web server. So I think we can get that far in about 30 minutes. I think we can get to the web server side and start to talk about that. So I'll try and shotgun this super quickly. Let me go ahead and... Okay, so first things first, we will need... Helps if I am in the right window. We will need to make a dedicated API. So we'll do gomod init, and that'll be oh, did I'm a doofus. Okay. So now we have our gomod, and then in the gomod file we will need a number of different things. Don't mind me just grabbing the actual gomod declaration that I need. All right. So first things first, we're going to need Gin. If you're not familiar with Gin, it's a Go-based web server. And then the other thing that's going to be really important is our, there's two ways you can do it. You can either do raw RPC calls, or you can actually just directly integrate the Node client itself. And I do butcher this every single time, so I'm going to go ahead and copy it. And just to show where that's coming from. So this is the Ceremony client that you all should have cloned already, and then you can get the relevant replace directive needed. Let me go ahead and also just open this project as a folder in Visual Studio Code. Great. Okay. So we have our replace directive, and we need to grab the node. So that will be ceremony client node. So this is assuming Howler API is sitting beside the ceremony client repository. And then cool. Let me see if it's actually complaining about that or not. Okay, it looks like it's good. Great. Make sure that yeah, okay, cool. All right, so then we'll actually have our main.go, and then if you're unfamiliar with Gin, and so by the way, this is also getting into the actual part that I've said previously for building applications on Q is to just write Go. This is where you will be just writing Go. The main reason for using Gin, if you've never used it before, is to be a simple web server. And by simple web server, I mean quite literally as simple as it gets. If you've never used it before, it's pretty straightforward. You can see I've been doing a little bit more Rust lately, so I keep tossing in semicolons. So a couple things. We want to mirror the old Howler API so that we can actually just make it basically slot in. So we'll take a few of these from our existing API declaration. We won't need the API gateway stuff. In fact, actually, I can delete it, but I'm afraid it's going to like wreck a bunch of stuff that it depended on. So I will save that for outside of this stream. And then we also have the index based API, and that's actually, we're going to merge those two together. So let's go ahead and, okay, cool. So we'll go ahead and set that up. And the basic premise, one other thing, this is going to be a lazy directive that I'm going to add here, but I'm just going to go ahead and add a large preamble of stuff to support cores, because otherwise we will immediately fail to make this request. It just flat out will reject me at the browser level, and I don't want to deal with that right now, so we'll just have a basic cores middleware. Okay, cool. So now we have that, and we'll import Gin, and then go ahead and define our get spaces call. And again, like I said, Gin's very no nonsense. It's very easy to use. So if you just want to return a simple response, like you can actually again, cannot talk and type. You can literally just put that as very simple types. Yeah, Gen is super easy to deal with. I think there's a few other common ones. Last I remember for using WebSockets, I toyed around with Gorilla. I haven't done that in a bit, so when we get to the WebSockets part, I'm kind of gonna be doing that on the fly. I might actually remember to actually take care of that ahead of time and piece that together so it won't be like a haphazard implementation. What does the H stand for? Hash, pretty sure. Pretty sure it stands for hash. What do you mean? I literally put it in the Go mod. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? It's right there. Okay, and then from the Q side of things, let me just go ahead and be lazy. Actually, let me be even lazier. Okay, cool. So we do have access to that. Great. Okay, and then cool. Okay, I will get that set up in a sec. Let's make sure that we actually have that. Oh. And I forgot the most obvious thing in the world. One thing that you have to have on top of this is you have to actually tell the router to run. That's what I get for being forgetful. Now, let me double check, because yeah, I'm pretty sure that it's literally just hash, like that it's a hash map. Okay, so now I should be able to do localhost 5173. Whoa, okay, let's not show that crap. Hang on a sec. Let me make sure I got the... I have too many things running at the same time, and then I end up showing things that are not meant to be shown yet. Guarantee you somebody's going to be like, I need to clip that. Okay. Okay, so let's try that again. Why is it still erroring out? There should be nothing listening on that now. Okay, okay, now it works. Great. Great. Okay, now we have that and not the other thing. Let's go ahead and do spaces. Now we got our formatted JSON. So that works the way you expect, and so now you have your basic entry point to start integrating towards Q. So now the next thing that you need is to actually set up a basically a light node inside the server application so that it can delegate into the requests. I don't think we're gonna fully get into that part, like into the actual like RPCing part tonight, but we will at least get an instance of it running. Again, I'm lazy. I'm never going to write code twice if I don't have to, so I'm going to copy. But the basic gist of creating a light node is to, where do I have the, should be in the wire. There it is. Okay. Yep. Okay. I always have to double check because I do a lot of. I missed the last stream. What is Howler? Howler was actually the origin of all of this. So back in the early days, like 7 years ago, I was doing an educational series teaching people how to code. Did it through example, and Howler was one of those examples. Basically, a decentralized Discord is what it turned into, and ultimately led to what Q is today. Okay, so anyway, new Blossom sub. We'll go ahead and pull that in. We don't have to worry about all those. In fact, actually, most of it we won't have to care about at all. The bootstrap peers we will. So normally you would omit this. Normally you'd omit the bootstrap peers part. 982. I don't know. I don't use Twitch very often, so I don't have affiliate or partner or anything like that. So it's entirely possible that is literally the best that Twitch will stream out. I don't know. Okay, so I'm gonna grab the. I actually do. I do like Unlonely. Like I'm not choosing Twitch as a vote of no confidence for Unlonely. I'm choosing Twitch because I have run into repeated issues trying to stream on Unlonely, and those issues have not happened streaming on Twitch. Okay, so where is the... Oh, right, there we go. Okay, so let me grab the config. We've got a few entries here that I'm just going to copy over. Why is it doing that? That's super weird. I don't know why, but for some reason it's not actually letting me do multi-line editing right now, and I don't know why. Okay, let me make sure there's anything else that I need. Ah, yeah, network. Oh, shoot. Network. We'll need to set it to 1. Cool. And then the other part is we need the peer store set up. There'll be nmem peer store. Oh, no. What am I talking about? Wonder if there... Did I actually make... I don't think I made an in-memory peer store. That sucks. Okay, well, I'll just have to wrap in the default one. Basic question, but where will the server run then? So this is what I was talking about with like the lift and shift model. So in this design, you would have a intermediary HTTP server that is doing the delegated calls with HTTPS, or doing the delegated calls via REST and WebSockets that actually calls to the network itself. In terms of deployment strategies, there's 2 different ways you could do that. You can either, and this is the model that I'm doing here, is that you basically have it wrapped as a desktop application. So you have your single page application as the front facing component on an Electron based application, and then you have the Electron application kicking up a backend server that it's communicating with. So the server would literally run on your own machine as an instance of Howler. So, like when you start Discord, you're starting the Discord application. Behind the scenes, there's actually a node server that's the back end of the front end that is handling all sorts of intermediary calls with Discord so that everything is a little bit like nicer of a response time for the user interface. Same concept, except in this case, instead of connecting to a third-party server, you're connecting to the Q network itself. in a like general web application context, you probably wouldn't want to do that. You would instead either do a direct RPC call, um, like do a direct RPC call against public nodes, or you would do a just a dedicated server that is proxying the calls appropriately. Um, but it's kind of like a toss up on which one you would prefer, because if you do the backend server route, then you do have a centralized component, and if your goal is to avoid those centralized components, then you should just architect towards a just pure RPC calls. In this context, because this is running on the actual machine of an end user, it's a little bit different. Okay, so where was I? I need the store, which means I have a lot more to just copy out because I'm not going to wire all that up. We need the peer store and PebbleDB. Why not? Oh, right, yeah. Okay. So we have to actually do config.config, and then we'll have the DB-oriented config. Is that a pointer? Yeah, it's a pointer. Because we need to do the default formatting. Those bootstrap here is local queue testnet. Yes. Yeah. Those bootstrap peers are the local queue testnet that I have on my own machine. You, if you saw the previous stream, you already saw these config files, and I previously joked, like, feel free to copy the private key if you want. They're never going to be used for mainnet. Yeah, these are just some basic ones that I put together in the last stream. Okay, so our path is going to be... I'm lazy. Okay. Trying to remember, and I never can. Okay. Weird. I don't know why it didn't. That's super weird. I remember there being like a... Huh. Okay, I guess I've forgotten. We'll find out. Yeah, I was gonna say, I think that one actually has the possibility of throwing an error. Okay, so config p2p and peer store. And again, lazy. This is just for example anyway, but we'll go ahead and create a logger. I thought that was... Okay, we'll find out. I don't think that's right. I'm pretty sure that for some reason there's actually there's the slight chance that it could actually have a error that it throws. If 1/3 of your Go code isn't an error check, something's off. Yeah, I know, right? So Discord has a Node.js server on the server part of the Electron app, and we will have a Go server on that same slot. Basically, yeah. Yeah, that's the basic concept. Okay, this is just flat wrong. Why is it? Oh, because I don't have it. Okay. Easy, easy, easy. Cool. Why isn't that resolving? Whoa. Okay. There we go. Cool. I don't know what it's complaining about anymore. Okay, I have like lost all ability to resolve packages. Let me make sure that that's in fact working. What the hell? Okay. You can see how much of this I actually do in Visual Studio most of the time versus just doing it on the terminal. Why is it complaining about what? I literally have... Okay, super weird. Let's try that again. Oh, okay. Yeah, that's on me. You know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna copy over the Go mod from that. Helps if I actually use the right Go mod. There we go. So this is unfortunately something that we will still have to keep doing for a little bit, which is the redirects. That will change with 2.0. I will open up the full mono repo, and then at that point forward, all these replace directives are gone. Okay, there we go. Cool, okay. That fixed that issue. Now we should actually have... Oh, yeah, sorry. If you're unfamiliar with what the replace directive does, in the Go module file, it basically tells the source resolver. So, for example, in all these various requirements that pop up in your Go mod file, it's actually pulling from the relevant repository to get the necessary Go files for that dependency. When you say replace, you're telling Go that instead of actually looking at this URL, to instead replace it with a local file path. So the expectation here is that the Howler API instance and the ceremony client instance of those two repositories are literally living side by side in the same folder. I don't know why I did that twice. I just need to go run. Great, cool. Oh, right, yeah. Okay, so that is another thing that goes away in 2.0 is you no longer have to do that stupid Go Experiment Arenas crap. I think I might have to, yeah, I was gonna say, I think I might have to actually do a bunch of other annoying directives. But I didn't even get that far. I need a whole bunch of stuff for the peers. So I'm gonna just save myself the effort and copy everything out, and we'll run it instead of running the first bootstrap peer. Save myself a whole lot of time. This actually will be moved into a file. Oh, now I get multi-line editing. So nice of you to show up. Great. And then now we have everything we need. Okay, great. So now the next part is we will need the listen multi-adder, and we'll also need the peer priv key. Great. Like I said, this is a throwaway key. Steal it if you want. I don't care. I already have that in place, and it needs to be 1. Okay, cool. Now that's done, let's see if we get a little bit further. Cool. Okay, so now you can see that we have our peer instance created inside and embedded in the API. So now we are like basically 70% of the way done. Now we just need to basically structure the HTTP calls into the raw RPC calls, and then define our types for the API. This is the other thing that's Q specific that's worth mentioning. So this will be homework for folks that are wanting to study up before the next session. Basically converting all of our Howler API types here, which are just defined as JSON, into the RDF schema that is on, that we have an example of on here, on the token example. This RDF schema, like I was saying before, there are certain things about Q application designs that, while yes, it's just write Go, we do have certain practices like schema compliance and schema enforcement that enriched schema enables, 1, efficient indexing, and 2, also makes it extremely explicit when you are making these basically these delegated consent calls between applications. It forces the information about what call is being requested for consent, immediately puts it up front in front of the user's face with full documentation, so there's no question about it. It's not like a mysterious hex bundle. Those are the things you just get for free by consequence of the well-formed schema and then coding everything else out in Go. So that's basically it. We're about 70% of the way there, and next Sunday we're gonna wrap it up and get everything making the RPC calls so that we can actually have our live running Howler application. And then we'll actually have like a full decentralized live chat just by swapping some APIs around. And I know it feels kind of like anticlimactic because, you know, I've been doing this for 7 years to just like smash it all together, and boom, I had the decentralized Discord clone that I wanted. But that's kind of the point of Q, is that it's meant to make application building not that difficult. Just you know, it gives you a lot of advantages for free and out of the box. So cool. I think that wraps things up for tonight. If there's any quick questions that folks have before oh, I'm sorry, I missed that question, JP. What about mobile? Is it the RPC route or another approach? So on mobile, yeah, you can actually do you can do the server-based model even on mobile if it's Android. I don't think iOS lets you do it. But either way, you can just do the raw RPC model. Like you can just make the raw RPC calls. I separate that out because on web, with a single page application, it is more efficient to use the gRPC invocations, but those gRPC invocations are not supported by browsers. Like the browser can't do raw gRPC. And so it's actually weird, but like setting up that intermediary like local server is more efficient than doing the raw gRPC calls. But on mobile, you can totally do it. Doesn't matter. Cool. Well, if there are no questions left for tonight, as always, you can reach out to me on Warpcast or Telegram or Signal if you've got that. And I'm always happy to answer. And I'll go ahead and get the Howler UI code set up on the updated Howler chat repo. And then, next Sunday is like the midway point before 2.0's launch, and you'll have a great example of the first application that can run on Q, other than the token itself. All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody. I will catch you in the next one.